It was a book that Huxley paints this picture of a dystopia, a future society that none of us would want to inhabit. It's just a really bad society. And in this society, it's a society controlled, but not by the normal means, not by the normal means that we would think of an authoritarian state, sort of a totalitarian state. Think of Stalin's Russia or Hitler's Nazi Germany, where everyone is controlled by fear and force. As opposed to that, this is a society that's actually controlled by a drug that induces pleasure, a drug called soma, which ironically is the Greek word for body, present in our passage today. Even though that's not what it was named from. But anyways, what we see with this picture of the society and the world that Huxley paints is that it's a world that is controlled by individuals having the availability to choose this pleasure drug, to choose this soma. So we can see a world where, left to their own devices, it's just as effective to give them what they want and let the people pursue their desires, just as effective as controlling them through fear in a different authoritarian state. It's nothing new. They are being enslaved through their own quote-unquote freedom. So what we see with Huxley is that he's really just giving us an extended metaphor of what Paul is talking about right here when he's addressing the slogan. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. It's a real danger. It's a real danger. The next slogan that we see in this passage starts bringing us into the more racier pieces that he's addressing. In the next verse, Paul states another worldly slogan. Foods for the stomach, and the stomach for foods. Now this might strike you as a rather odd slogan. Like, what's going on here? Like, this is a weird thing to say. Like, how is that a rebuttal to someone's argument? Well, what's going on here is that the Corinthian Christians and the world around them are making the argument out of function. So, you have a stomach and it gets hungry. So you feed it with food. Stomach for food, food for the stomach. So likewise, if you have a sexual desire, you fulfill that sexual desire. That's what it's there for. That's the idea. Back when I was playing football in college, we had a rather sexualized saying that went, if it feels good, keep doing it. That's what the guys would say. And it's a similar idea right here. It's that idea of why deny your natural desires? Like, these are natural, so just fill them. Paul counters this, obviously, with a godly response. And he gives what I would say one of the most shocking expressions of why it's a bad idea to sleep around and basically sin sexually. He writes, starting in verse 13, foods for the stomach for foods, but God will destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. And God both raised up the Lord and will also raise us up by his power. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them members of a harlot? Certainly not. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a harlot is one body with her? For the two, he says, shall become one flesh. But he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit with him. Flee sexual immorality. What we see here is Paul is fighting this cultural, worldly perspective, this Greek perspective, much like he's doing in the previous sections in his letter, with the biblical perspective. He draws, which is a twofold attack. First, he's attacking using a Hebraic understanding, a long-held tradition, and then he's also relating it back to the example of Christ. Raymond Collins, a Bible scholar, explains what's going on within the Corinthian Christian body with these words. An anthropological dualism that separated body from spirit had been accepted by some of the Corinthian Christians at Corinth. That dualism underestimated the value of the body and affirms its transience. With a slogan that proclaimed that anything goes, and that's the first slogan that we looked at this morning, and a conviction that the body was destined for destruction, those infected by this dualism did not believe that the satisfaction of physical instinct, cravings for food or sexual desires, had any long-term consequences. So how does Paul counter this very worldly and quite frankly very pagan understanding of our bodies and the relationship between our bodies and our souls? He starts with an argument out of the example of Jesus, and then he uses Jesus' words found in Matthew 19. But before we actually unpack that argument, those arguments, I want us to be very clear about what he is addressing here. We run a real danger when we look at this passage to sort of kind of keep it at a distance, say, all right, this is such an extreme example. I would never, ever go solicit a prostitute like Paul's addressing here. And I would counsel caution with that sort of reaction, because actually the word that Paul is using in verse 13 when he says that the body is not for sexual immorality is the word porneia, the very word we get our word pornography from. It's a word, according to a Greek dictionary, that refers to prostitution, unchastity, fornication, meaning sex outside of marriage, and basically any kind of unlawful sexual intercourse. There's another way to describe it, I've heard it described as it's sort of a junk drawer term for any sort of sexual perversion. So the point being here is that when Paul is talking about addressing this issue, addressing this sin, he's addressing it much more broadly than just simply the example of a man going to the temple and seeking out a prostitute. He's addressing basically all sort of broken sexual expression within this letter. So if you've ever been tempted to visit a porn site or tempted to interact in a way with your boyfriend or girlfriend that in a way that's clearly sexual sin, he's addressing that sort of behavior here. Let's get back to Paul's counter-argument. He makes the point that it does matter to God what we do with our bodies. And how he does that is he points to the fact that God greatly valued Jesus' body and greatly values our body as seen by the resurrection that Jesus went through, the bodily resurrection Jesus went through, and our future resurrection. All right? And that's a theme that's going to come back in the letter, back in chapter 15 of this letter, when he talks about the resurrection, our new bodies. From there, he moves on to share with us how the maker of sex, the maker of our sexuality, views this act.